The romance that began between handcuffs and almost cost him his life. Thornfield Plantation, Virginia, 1855. The scorching sun beat down on the already weathered back of Josiah, a 28-year-old man whose calloused hands concealed a heart that still knew how to pray. Every morning before Foreman Miller awoke, Josiah whispered the words his mother had taught him. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." It was all that remained of his freedom, a faith that no one could chain. That August afternoon, everything changed. A carriage stopped in front of the big house. Out stepped Sarah, a woman with ebony skin and eyes that shone with a light Josiah hadn't seen in years. She came from South Carolina, sold after the death of her former master, but there was something different about her, an upright, almost defiant posture, even under the weight of the invisible chains they all carried. When their eyes first met in the farmyard, it was as if time stood still. Sarah carried a battered Bible hidden among her few belongings. Josiah noticed it was the same book he kept buried under the floorboards of his cabin, reading by the light of stolen candles, risking beatings for each page turned. In that heavy silence, they both recognized something precious in each other, not just faith, but living hope. "Watch out for that one," growled Miller, spitting tobacco on the ground. She came with a reputation for being a troublemaker. They say she taught slaves to read on the previous plantation. Lucky for her, Mr. Thompson died before he could prove it. The foreman laughed cruelly. But here in Thornfield, she'll learn her place quickly. Josiah lowered his eyes, feigning submission, but his heart was racing. A woman who taught reading, who carried the word even knowing the mortal risk. He needed to meet her, but how? Any interaction between slaves was watched, controlled, punished with violence. Master Thornfield had whipped Moses to death simply for being seen talking to a slave from another plantation. Fear was the system's most effective tool. That night, Josiah prayed differently. He didn't just ask for strength to survive the next cotton-dusting day under the relentless sun. He asked for courage. He asked for a divine sign. "Lord, if there is purpose in all this pain, show it to me now. If this woman crossed my path by your will, open a door that no man can close." He didn't know that Sarah, just 50 meters away in the damp women's hut, was making the same prayer, with the same broken words of hope, under the same starry sky that was the only witness to her true freedom. The following days were silent torture. They crossed paths only during work, he in the endless cotton fields, she in the big house serving the masters. But they developed a language that no overseer could intercept. A longer glance while fetching water from the communal well, a slight nod during the forced Sunday chant that Mr. Thornfield allowed to keep the blacks docile and submissive, as he told visitors. Then came the opportunity that would change everything. Mrs. Thornfield fell gravely ill with a fever, and the big house was in chaos with doctors and expensive medicines. Miller needed someone strong to carry extra firewood during the cold September night. "You, Josiah, and be quick, you lazy black man." It was risky, but Sarah had managed to delay her tasks in the kitchen on purpose. When Josiah came in from the back with the firewood, their eyes met through the thick smoke from the wood-burning stove. Time stood still. "Psalm 23, she whispered, so low it could only have been the crackling of the fire. But Josiah heard every syllable like thunder. His heart leaped violently. It was the secret code, confirmation that they shared not only the Christian faith, but perhaps something even more dangerous, real hope for freedom. He nodded almost imperceptibly. "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death," he replied equally humbly, "I will fear no evil, for you are with me." Sarah slipped a small piece of paper between the firewood he was carrying. Old smoking cabin, midnight, new moon. It was only seconds of risky interaction, but it changed absolutely everything for both of them. At midnight, his heart pounding so hard he feared waking the other slaves in the nearby huts, Josiah crawled to the old tobacco-drying hut, abandoned for years and covered in vines. Sarah was already there, wrapped in a thin, tattered shawl, trembling not from cold, but from pure adrenaline and fear. "I thought you wouldn't come," she said, tears glistening in her eyes even in the darkness. "I thought it was foolish of me to imagine a man would risk so much for—" "It's no foolishness at all," Josiah interrupted, approaching carefully, still alert to any outside sound. "Sarah, ever since you arrived in Thornfield, it's as if God lit a candle in the midst of such profound darkness that I barely remembered there was light in this world." He paused, searching for the right words. "You've risked so much just to find me. Why? We barely know each other." She stared at him with a burning intensity. "Because if we don't risk everything for real human connection, for true love, for something beyond this daily inhuman misery, then they've already killed us inside, Josiah. And that's far worse than any lash on the back or shackles on the feet." Sarah opened her worn but precious Bible. "My mother taught me to read before she was sold away when I was only 7 years old. She always said, 'Sarah, they can chain your frail body, but your mind and soul belong exclusively to God.'" The secret meetings continued for 2 perilous months. Josiah and Sarah stole impossible moments in the abandoned cabin, 15 minutes of conversation here, half an hour of shared Bible reading there. He taught her the secret paths of the dense forest surrounding Thornfield. She taught him new and complex words from Scripture that he couldn't decipher on his own by the dim candlelight. But more than knowledge, they shared forbidden dreams. "One day," Sarah whispered with her eyes closed, imagining, "when we are free, I want a small house with real windows. I want to wake up and see the sun rising without fear of the whip." Josiah always gently corrected her. "Don't say if, Sarah. Say when we are free." True faith is having absolute certainty of what one still hopes to receive. December arrived with brutal frosts and devastating news that shook the entire plantation like an earthquake. Mr. Thornfield had decided to sell 20 slaves to cover enormous gambling and drinking debts. The list would be announced shortly after Christmas. Terror spread through the cabins like an uncontrollable wildfire. Families would be brutally separated, mothers torn from their young children, siblings sent to different states, literally never to see each other again in this life. It was the utterly routine horror of slavery, but it never ever hurt less. "I need to tell you something urgent," Sarah said on a particularly cold night, her voice trembling with fear and determination. They were in the smoking shack, bolder now, risking progressively longer encounters. "Josiah, I'm not just any slave who can read." She took a deep breath, preparing herself. "In South Carolina, before I was sold, I was an active part of a secret network, an abolitionist network that helped enslaved people escape via the Underground Railroad to the free North." Josiah felt the whole world spin violently. The Underground Railroad, the legendary, utterly secret network of courageous abolitionists, of hidden safe houses, of perilous routes north to territories of true freedom. He had heard only vague whispers, fantastical stories told quietly around campfires, but he always thought they were just that, stories invented to give hope. "Sarah," his voice completely failed him. "I was found out through treachery," she continued, tears now flowing freely. "One of the fugitives I helped was captured by hunters, brutally tortured until he broke. He gave up names under torture. I should have been publicly hanged as an example, Josiah, but Mr. Thompson died suddenly of a heart attack before they could hold my trial. His terrified widow sold me out very quickly, desperately trying to hide the scandal from the family. That's exactly why I'm here in Thornfield." She gripped his rough hands tightly. "But the network still exists and works. There's a safe house exactly 20 miles north of here. A brave Quaker couple who risk everything hiding fugitives. Are you saying that Josiah couldn't finish the sentence? The idea was too big, too dangerous, too impossible to seriously contemplate. I'm saying we can try to escape together, Sarah declared firmly, clenching her hands even tighter. The sale list comes out in exactly 1 week. If your name or mine is on it, we'll be separated forever, Josiah. But if we go before then, if we try... She paused, seeing the genuine fear and terrible conflict in his eyes. I know perfectly well the mortal risk. I know very well that if we are captured, death will be merciful compared to what they will do to us as an example. But I'd rather die trying to live free than spend another single day being the legal property of another man. Josiah closed his eyes tightly. He saw his mother being sold when he was only 8 years old, torn from him screaming and pleading. He saw Moses's shattered back after being whipped to death for insolence. He saw the endless years of desperate prayers asking only for divine strength to survive the next impossible day. But then he felt Sarah's hands warm and alive in his, and heard his own voice saying words he hadn't planned. When exactly do we leave? They didn't know, they had no idea, that Miller, the cruel and greedy overseer, had followed Sarah that particular night, and that he was, at that very crucial moment, just a few feet from the old cabin, listening to every damning word through the wide cracks in the rotting wood, a wicked and cruel smile slowly forming on his alcohol-scarred face. The reward for capturing one runaway slave was excellent, but for capturing 2 slaves and proven members of the legendary Underground Railroad at that would buy months of expensive drinks and prostitutes. Miller acted with the calculated cunning of a venomous snake. He didn't arrest them immediately. That would be wasting a far greater golden opportunity. For 3 whole, tortuous days, he let them carefully plan, gather meager hidden provisions, and set the exact date for their daring escape. Every minute detail they passionately discussed, he listened to and memorized. Every step of the desperate plan he mentally recorded. Let those stupid blacks bury themselves even deeper, he constantly thought, savoring in advance the glorious moment of brutal capture, like a hungry predator savors its defenseless prey. The chosen night was December 23rd, 1855, a moonless Friday, with a weather forecast predicting heavy snow that would perfectly cover all tracks. Josiah and Sarah had meticulously prepared everything. Extra thick clothing strategically hidden in the forest, precious food stolen little by little during risky weeks, even a crude but functional map that Sarah had drawn from impressive memory of the Underground Railroad routes. At exactly 2 in the morning, they would meet at the old giant oak tree half a kilometer from the farm, then quickly head north through the dense pine forest. Josiah emerged first from his cramped hut, his heart pounding wildly in his chest. He carried only his precious Bible, buried years ago, and a rusty sugarcane knife he had stolen from the fields. Lord, he prayed fervently as he walked in the shadows, if it is not absolutely your divine will, close this dangerous door right now. But if it is your plan, protect us with your power. Each silent step was a terrible agony of paralyzing fear and desperate hope mixed together. He thought intensely of Sarah, of the impossible life they might build together in the free North. He loved her deeply. This absolute truth had become utterly undeniable. He loved her unwavering courage, her resilient faith, the stubborn way she adamantly refused to be broken by the inhumane system. But when he arrived breathless at the agreed-upon oak tree, he found not only Sarah waiting. Miller was standing there, with 3 more heavily armed men, flashlights blazing, long rifles pointed directly at him. Sarah was already brutally handcuffed, bright red blood gushing from a deep cut on her forehead. "Sarah!" Josiah cried desperately, taking an instinctive step forward. A deafening shot exploded dangerously close to his bare feet, stopping him instantly. "Welcome to the party, Josiah," Miller spat angrily, approaching menacingly. "Did you really think you could pull it off? Two stupid black men playing Underground Railroad like they were important?" He delivered a violent, calculated punch to Josiah's stomach, knocking him painfully to the cold ground. "You'll set a terrible example for the whole plantation. You'll be begging for a merciful death before I finish you off." But then something completely unexpected happened that no one could have predicted. A firm, authoritative male voice cut through the frigid night. "Release them immediately. Now." It was Jacob Thornfield, the plantation owner's eldest son, recently returned from his extended studies in the progressive North. He pointed an expensive pistol directly at Miller's head. "I said clearly, release them right now." "Mr. Jacob," Miller stammered, confused and nervous. "Those runaway slaves were trying to escape. I was just doing my job." "You were meticulously preparing to brutally torture them and claim the entire hefty reward for yourself without sharing a single penny with my father, weren't you?" Jacob held the weapon perfectly steady, without trembling. Josiah and Sarah watched in utter disbelief, understanding nothing. "I saw you spying on them surreptitiously for days. I saw all your greedy plans. Initially, I thought you were preventing a common escape, but then I realized something crucial. You were deliberately letting this happen to profit much more personally." The atmosphere changed drastically. The other armed men slowly lowered their weapons, unsure of what to do. Jacob continued in a commanding voice. "Here's exactly what's going to happen now. You," he coldly gestured to the hired thugs, "go back to your miserable beds immediately and forget about this night completely. Nothing happened here. Miller, you collect your final payment and leave this property for good by dawn. If my father finds out he lost two extremely valuable slaves because of your pathetic greed, you won't see next Christmas alive." "But sir, they are dangerous fugitives and—" "Absolute silence!" Jacob fired his pistol violently into the night air. The gunshot echoed through the forest. "Josiah, Sarah, run now. Exactly 20 miles north. Find the grey stone house with the red cloth hanging from the window. Tell them Jacob Thornfield sent you personally. Run fast, and don't look back." Josiah grabbed Sarah, still dazed from the blow, and they ran as they had never run before. They ran desperately through the dark woods into the total darkness of the night, fleeing not only from Miller, but from a lifetime of chains, whips, and humiliation. Sarah wept copiously as she staggered along. Why the hell did he do this to us?" Josiah had no answer. He simply squeezed her injured hand and kept running, praying with each breathless and painful step. "Thank you, Lord. Thank you for this inexplicable mercy." The grey stone house finally appeared at dawn, exactly as Sarah had described in detail. Josiah and she were completely exhausted, their feet bleeding profusely, their clothes torn wildly by sharp branches. But they were miraculously alive. They were together. He knocked on the heavy door with the secret pattern Sarah had taught him. 3 quick knocks, 2 slow ones, 3 quick ones again. The door opened a crack cautiously, revealing the incredibly kind face of a Quaker woman with grey hair and gentle eyes. "Jacob Thornfield sent us," Josiah gasped desperately. The door swung open immediately. "Quick, get in! You're the first ones he sent us." The woman, who gently introduced herself as Martha, led them to a secret cellar hidden beneath the floorboards. "Stay here in absolute silence. Hot food and clean water are coming soon. In exactly 3 days, when the initial demand decreases, we'll take you to the next safe station." In that dark but safe basement, Josiah finally embraced Sarah for the first time. She trembled violently, the traumatic shock of recent events finally hitting her completely. "I almost died of terror when I saw Miller there waiting for us," she whispered, broken. "I thought it was the end. I thought I'd lost you even before." She didn't finish the sentence, but Josiah understood perfectly. "Sarah," he said emotionally, gently holding her bruised face in his calloused hands. "I know absolutely nothing about what the uncertain future holds. I don't know if we'll ever truly reach a free North. I don't know if we'll ever be truly free. But I know this with absolute certainty. God brought us together for some divine purpose, and whatever comes our way, we will face it absolutely together." He then kissed her for the first time, a deep kiss that tasted strangely of salty tears, metallic blood, dirty earth, and pure hope. It was the freest kiss either of them had ever experienced in their entire lives. 3 days later, Martha woke them up with a sudden warning. Dramatic change of plans. Miller didn't accept Jacob's money. Miller went straight to Mr. Thornfield and told him absolutely everything. Martha continued hurriedly. "Your father was absolutely furious, not because you ran away, but because Jacob betrayed him publicly. Now there are professional bounty hunters looking for you all over the county, and they want to capture Jacob as well, as an abolitionist conspirator. You need to leave immediately, by the most dangerous and quickest route." "Why did Jacob risk everything for us?" Sarah asked, the devastating question that had tormented her since that impossible night. Martha exchanged a deep, meaningful look with her husband, Thomas, who had just entered carrying provisions. "You have every right to know the truth," Thomas said gravely. "Jacob, he's not just some spoiled son of a rich farmer. In the north, during his studies, he secretly joined the radical abolitionists. He saw the unspeakable horrors of slavery through completely new eyes, but more importantly than that," he paused dramatically, "Jacob is my blood nephew. My sister Rebecca married Thornfield solely for dirty money, against our family's wishes. Jacob grew up seeing daily the repugnant hypocrisy, the completely false Christianity that advocated chains and whips while quoting Jesus. When he went to study in the progressive North, he finally understood the liberating truth. He returned to Thornfield, not to comfortably inherit the lucrative plantation," Martha continued, "but to systematically destroy it from within. To free as many slaves as he could, even if it cost him absolutely everything. You were the first on this sacred mission. You will not be the last, God willing." Josiah felt hot tears welling up uncontrollably. A privileged white man, with absolutely everything to lose, had deliberately chosen the right and dangerous path. He had chosen to follow the true and radical Christ, not the convenient and false Christ of hypocritical slave owners. "Where is he right now?" he asked anxiously. "Imprisoned, like a criminal in his own home," Thomas replied grimly. "His father violently locked him up until he decides what to do legally. There are horrible rumors that he will send him to an insane asylum, officially declaring him insane. It's socially easier than publicly admitting to having an abolitionist son." Sarah squeezed Josiah's hand tightly. "We can't just let him rot there, not after everything he risked for us." Josiah agreed immediately, but Martha intervened, alarmed. "You don't understand the gravity of the situation. If you go back now, you'll certainly die. Jacob knew this perfectly well when he helped you. It was his conscious choice, his voluntary sacrifice." "No, and if we don't return for him," Josiah said firmly, his voice carrying a completely new and powerful conviction, "then his courageous sacrifice will have been worth absolutely nothing. Martha, Thomas, you yourselves said that true faith is proven exclusively in concrete actions. Well then, here is our definitive action." What followed was the most utterly insane and desperate plan that entire stretch of the Underground Railroad had witnessed in decades. And it depended not only on suicidal courage, but on a divine justice that no one expected to witness. The planned attack on Thornfield was scheduled for Christmas Eve, 1855. Josiah, Sarah, and 6 armed members of the abolitionist network, including a courageous Quaker lawyer named Samuel and 2 experienced former slaves, returned to the plantation not as terrified fugitives, but as determined liberators. The plan was audacious: to raid during the grand Christmas feast that Mr. Thornfield threw annually to impress neighbors when the local masters would be completely drunk and distracted, freeing Jacob from house arrest and 20 more slaves all at once. "This is sheer suicidal madness," Samuel had said during the detailed planning. But Christ was also called mad when he violently overturned the tables of the merchants in the temple. Josiah and Sarah had shared a deep, understanding look. Yes, perhaps it was utter madness, but it was the sacred madness of true love, of divine justice, of faith that literally moves mountains. On the frigid night of December 24th, while false and empty Christmas carols hypocritically blared from the brightly lit manor house, the group silently infiltrated. Josiah knew every dark corner, every useful shadow of the plantation. He went straight to the room where Jacob was locked up as a prisoner. The rusty lock gave way with an improvised lever. Jacob, thin and bearded after weeks of solitary confinement, looked at Josiah as one sees an impossible ghost. You really came back? Just as Christ returned from the dead for us," Josiah replied simply, helping him to his feet. "No one gets left behind. I learned that from you, Jacob, but the plan crumbled when Miller, in a last desperate attempt at redemption in the eyes of Mr. Thornfield, raised the alarm by shouting. Gunfire erupted everywhere, screams, absolute chaos. Josiah shielded Sarah with his own body as they ran desperately towards the slave huts. "Wake up! Run now!" he yelled with all his might. "There's a route to the north! You are free if you choose to be!" In the violent chaos, something extraordinary and completely unexpected happened. The slaves did not flee in chaotic panic. They quickly organized themselves. Endless years of shared suffering had created a powerful unity that no master could break. While the masters staggered drunkenly, trying to understand confusedly what was happening, 43 enslaved people marched in an organized fashion out of Thornfield, singing hymns of true freedom for the first time. Miller desperately tried to block the main exit, his rifle trembling in his hands. "I'll kill you all now," he shouted, completely desperate. It was Sarah who bravely stepped forward, unarmed, with only her precious Bible in her hands. "Then kill," she said calmly, without visible fear. "But you'll have to explain to God why you killed 43 of his children simply trying to get home." Something in those simple words, in that utterly insane courage, made Miller hesitate fatally. That was enough. 2 armed former slaves quickly disarmed him. The epic journey north took 3 brutal weeks, along the most dangerous and hidden routes of the Underground Railroad. They lost 5 precious people, 2 elderly people who couldn't withstand the extreme cold, 3 young people captured by violent patrols. Each loss hurt like a consuming fire. But 38 finally arrived. 38 crossed into Pennsylvania, to blessed territories where the law no longer considered them property. Jacob Thornfield never returned to the slaveholding South. He dedicated his entire life to the abolitionist cause, writing fiery articles, speaking publicly, and financing daring escapes with his inheritance. He died poor and completely happy in 1889, having helped over 200 people achieve true freedom. Josiah and Sarah were married in a small black church in Philadelphia 3 months after arriving in the North. The pastor who married them later commented that he had never seen a couple hold hands so tightly during their sacred vows, as if they feared that if they let go for a second, everything would vanish like a dream. They had 4 beautiful and healthy children. They all learned to read perfectly. They all heard repeatedly the story of how their parents' love was born in chains and almost cost them both their lives. But more importantly, they all learned that true faith does not passively kneel before unjust chains. It courageously rises up against them. In 1863, when Abraham Lincoln signed the historic Emancipation Proclamation, Josiah was 36 years old. He and Sarah were in the emotional crowd in Washington when the news was officially announced. Elderly people around them fell to their knees weeping, but Josiah and Sarah stood, hands tightly clasped, gazing at the sky. "Thank you," he whispered emotionally, "for every moment of fear, for every step in the darkness, for every time we almost gave up. because all of that brought us here, together, free. Sarah kissed her calloused hand and added, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." And they lacked nothing. Because they had each other, they had their unwavering faith, and they had a history that proved that even in the heaviest chains, love can be born. And when that love is founded on faith and courage, even death cannot destroy it. This was a true story of faith, love, and freedom won with blood, sweat, and tears. If stories like this touch your heart deeply, if you believe we need to remember these powerful examples of courage and unwavering faith, subscribe to the channel right now. Every week we bring you real and inspiring stories of people who faced the impossible and won against all odds. Because in dark times, we desperately need light. And these stories are torches lit in the darkness of human history. Subscribe now and activate the bell so you don't miss any exciting journey of faith, love, and redemption. Leave a comment saying which part moved you the most.